Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into one of philosophy's oldest, most nagging questions. And we're going to do it by decoding a text that's about 2,500 years old. This is a journey right to the heart of the debate about who we really are.
So it all boils down to this one single question. What happens to the self after we die? I mean, for thousands of years, this question has sparked some of the most intense debates you can imagine. We're going to jump right into the middle of it by looking at an ancient Pali scripture, the Pañcattayasutta, which, believe it or not, kind of captures that debate in real time.
Okay, let's get into the oldest debate. Now, this text, it doesn't just hand us a nice, simple answer. Oh no, instead it drops us right into the middle of a philosophical firestorm. Think of it like a chaotic marketplace of ideas, just buzzing with thinkers, all passionately arguing about what the self is and what happens to it in the end.
So here's a carousel of answers. And when you look at a direct modern translation from the original Pali, you see all these different arguments laid out, one after another. And here's the kicker. They all contradict each other. It really feels like you're stuck on this dizzying, never-ending carousel of speculation.
So first up on this ride, theory number one, the self is conscious after death. These are the eternalists, and their view is pretty straightforward. The self, or atta in Pali, definitely, absolutely continues on after you die. And it's not just existing, it's fully conscious, totally aware.
Then you have the complete opposite. Theory 2, the self is unconscious after death. So for this group, yeah, the self continues, but it slips into a state of unconsciousness, kind of like a dormant, dreamless sleep that just goes on forever.
Naturally, some thinkers tried to split the difference, find a middle path. Their theory? The self is neither conscious nor unconscious. They came up with this really mysterious third state, something that's somehow beyond both consciousness and unconsciousness. Good luck figuring that one out.
And then, of course, you've got the fourth theory. The self is completely annihilated. These were the annihilationists. For them, the answer was just brutally simple. When you die, the self you know is just gone, utterly destroyed. Poof. End of story. Nothing left.
So, when you lay it all out, the text basically boils this whole chaotic debate down to 5 core theories. You've got the 4 we just talked about, conscious, unconscious, neither, and annihilated, all focused on the afterlife. But then there's this 5th, really interesting idea, that maybe, just maybe, liberation has nothing to do with what happens after we die. Maybe it's all about what we do right here, right now, in this life.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. After hearing all of these competing theories, what does the Buddha say? Well, his response is the same for every single one. He just refuses to pick a side. He doesn't get into the debate at all. He just says, the awakened one has gone beyond that. It's like he's just stepped off the carousel. But how did he do that?
Right? The word that changes everything. See, the secret to understanding this isn't about picking the right answer from the list. The secret is actually hidden in the language itself. To really get it, we've got to move past a simple, modern translation and dig deep into the root meaning of one single, incredibly powerful word.
That word is upadana. Now, if you look at a lot of modern translations, you'll see it as clinging. And that makes sense, right? It sounds like a psychological grip. But if you do a much deeper linguistic dive back to how the word was actually used 2,500 years ago, you uncover a more dynamic, almost physical meaning: fuel. So how do we get this insight? Well, it comes from a classical method of analysis called niruti. And what niruti does is pretty cool. It helps you get past the surface-level dictionary definition of a word. It's not just about what a word means, it's about what it does. It's about uncovering the original, dynamic intent behind the teaching. Okay, let's look at clinging versus fuel, because this one little shift in translation, from thinking about clinging to thinking about fuel, well, it completely changes the entire picture. It reframes the whole problem. Think about it. When you hear the word clinging, you immediately picture a psychological grip, right? It feels like an internal mental state, a tightness in your mind that you just have to find a way to let go of.
But fuel, that word paints a totally different picture. Fuel isn't just a mental state, it's a substance. It's something that feeds a process. It's the stuff you actively add that keeps the fire of suffering and this endless speculation burning hot.
And that is the Buddha's radical point, right there. The text is basically saying that by arguing so fiercely, by defending their own pet theories, these philosophers were actually, without even realizing it, feeding the very fire they were trying to understand. Their very views become the fuel. So how do you leave the carousel? Well, the Buddha's escape plan is pretty radical. The point isn't to win the debate. It's not about picking the right answer. The goal is to learn how to stop adding fuel to the fire. Period. You just stop feeding it, and eventually it just burns out on its own.
And the text actually gives us a practical escape route. It's a path that completely bypasses all that speculation. It's not about thinking your way out of the problem, it's about watching. You watch your senses, what you see, hear, touch. You notice how these sensations just come and go. You understand the danger in getting attached. And then you just stop adding fuel. You stop feeding that whole cycle of reaction.
The ultimate goal here has a name, Anupadāvi Moko. It sounds complicated, but let's break it down. Un means not or without. Upada, well, that's our word for fuel, and vimoko means release or freedom. So it's a release without fuel, a final freedom that happens not because you found the right answer, but because the fire just went out. It simply ran out of fuel.
And so, in the end, this ancient explainer flips the whole thing right back on us. It asks us to look at the heated debates in our own lives, in our own minds. Are you trying to find the right answer? Or are you just adding more fuel to the fire?